Then let's start. Perfect. Great. So we are very glad with Simon to welcome everyone today. The webinar is recorded. I hope that's okay for all of you. We're going to share the replay afterwards. You're welcome to ask any question in the chat. We also have Mathilde from our team that you don't see on the screen, but that might be the one answering some of the questions. I'm Diane. I'm the development director at Climate Dividends. Maybe Simon and Romain, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Yes, I'll start because I'm not polite. Sorry, Romain. So I'm the technical director of the association. I'm in charge of everything that's technical, which means, and we'll talk a bit about that later on today, but I make sure that our approach makes sense, is robust, is credible, and can be used widely by investors and companies in order to measure their positive climate contribution. And Romain.
Okay, so me, I'm Romain Lecomte. I work in Decathlon for more than 15 years, and today I'm currently a sustainable manager in urban mobility team. So I help all the sport concerning the urban mobility to be better in terms of product impact, in terms of commercialization, in terms of subject like climate dividends.
Thank you. Great. What are we gonna talk about today? So I'm gonna quickly introduce what we do, but a lot of you already know Climate Dividends, and you're mainly here to hear Simon present the methodology on the mobility sector that we've developed. We'll share some of the technical challenges, and then Romain will give us a testimonial on how they use Climate Dividends at Decathlon, why they choose to go through this with this initiative, and also maybe some of your challenges, and we'll take some questions. Climate Dividends Association has been created in the last 2 years. We are basically created by a group of investors and ADEME, which is the French Department for Transition. Mirova, Team for the Planet, SWIP 2050, and Canopy, which is a foundation. Our main mission is really to accelerate the ecological transition and hence to promote investment into climate solution. It's very broad, and we are a team of 4 to do this. You may have seen Laura and Simon around for a long time, and then Mathilde, who just joined, and myself. We have different committees that are really helping us in terms of strategy, but we also have a technical committee led by Simon and a philanthropy committee. All of this is possible because we are part of an ecosystem that is, as we say, vibrant. It's also very broad. It's international, and it keeps on growing. We'll go back a little bit to the other frameworks and guidelines and what we call friends and partners later on. We started from the context that today, if a company succeeds financially, it's very easy to see. You give back as a company financial dividends to your shareholders. But if you're contributing positively to the climate, it's really hard to value. And there are no ways today to value and standardize avoided or removed emissions. This should be more recognized and maximized, and should also be leveraged to push for more investment into your companies. That's basically what we decided to tackle. It's to measure and to value the climate positive contribution of a company and its activity. And we calculate this by using the climate dividend mechanism. And 1 ton of CO2 avoided or removed by the activity of the company equals to 1 climate dividend. It's really important to keep in mind that climate dividends are not a financial asset. They are not to be used for offsetting, for offset. They are really just an extra financial information, but we try to use those KPIs, this KPI, into a lot of different use cases, including financial ones. I'm going to share that a little bit after. When a company issues climate dividends, the idea is then to distribute climate dividends back to its shareholder for debt and equity. And then if it's giving climate dividends to your JP, then you can also, the JP can redirect this to the LP. So it really helps to show the link between an investment and the climate efficiency or the impact of this investment into the company.
Thank you, Diane. I wanted to talk about where we stand in the value chain of avoided emissions. You might not be geeks of climate topics as I am, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where we are, where we stand, and who are the people relevant today in this, I want to say market, I don't know if it's a market. First and foremost, there are today, can you put it in? Yeah, thank you, Diane. There are guidances that we collectively rely on, mostly, and you might have heard of them. This is the Net Zero Initiative, which was funded in France by Carbon 4. Today, it has been, let's say, overthrown, or they collaborated with the WBCSD to publish subsequent versions of guidelines regarding avoided emissions, and this is what we follow, and that is what most people are following today. Then these guidances are translated into what we call sectoral methodologies. So how do we apply those principles for the mobility sector, as we are talking today, or the building sector, or whatever? I mentioned a few standards that we recognize as climate dividends because they align with the overarching methodologies, the overarching guidances that I've just talked about. And then you have databases that allow people to get quick and as precise as possible emission factors regarding their activities. I mentioned Crane, which is mostly used in Northern America for private equity, but also COI that has been developed on this basis, and the avoided emissions platform that is led by Pontis and Iker. So this is the market. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that it's converging. People are collaborating in order to basically have common ground in terms of technical aspects, and we are part of this initiative and this movement towards convergence, so that we can make sure that in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, people, when they talk about avoided emissions, are using the same definitions and can be compared across several sectors and several companies. Then what we do at Climate Dividends, we are mostly a not authentifying tool. We make sure that we have an harmonized and robust methodology. So this is our protocol. Our protocol is basically taking the guidelines from the WBCSD, but restricting them in order to make sure that a given company in the same context will always lead to the same result in terms of climate dividends. So we make sure that we are constraining a lot the guidances. Then we have a standardized process, and I think Jan will talk about that later. And adding on top of that a third-party intervention, a third-party audit that really locks in the robustness of the calculations. And then at the end, we add the notion of transparency. We have a public registry on which you can find every claim that has been done in terms of climate dividends, where you can find the methodologies, where you can find the underlying data, and you can find basically everything that makes sense in terms of claims. So everything is transparent, everything robust, and everything has been locked in by a third-party intervention. And then at the end, we allow shareholders and or investors to be able to trace their investment and the impact of their investment back to their participations. That's really important because it's about measuring the climate efficiency of your capital allocation or your investments more broadly, so that you can say, well, I invested 10 million euros in this solution, this company. This is what it got me. This is what was the impact that was made possible through my investments, basically. And of course, climate dividends are also a way to measure what we call the goodwill of a company. So how much, sometimes we call it climate premium. So how much more does a company is worth based on its ability to generate and to prove its positive climate impact. of course, that can also be said for debt holders and investors, because it already allows companies to fix sustainable targets for their loans so that they can access debt at more favorable terms, basically. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Simon. And Simon is very humble because he's part of all the committees of the other frameworks and guidelines, and we're all contributing towards a more standardized process. Our process is very simple, is basically 5 steps. After the eligibility phase, there is a phase where we choose the methodology and calculate the data. I mean, use the data to calculate the tons of avoided emission or removed thanks to the activity of the solution. The third step would be really to have a third party that we accredit that will validate the choice of the methodology and verify the data. It's where really you have the standardization brick that really appears thanks to a third party audit. And then we basically transform the amount of avoided emission into an amount of climate dividend. But first we attribute an attribution key. We use an attribution key to make sure that all the different stakeholders in the value chain are rewarded at the right amount. And then we hence issue climate dividends and distribute them to the different shareholders. We take a lot of effort on communicating also what they are, how does it work, and what value does it really show. We're really at the stage where we're pushing climate dividends to be more used from companies directly, but also from investors who are now asking their portfolio companies to report on avoided emissions and climate dividends. We have been recently also added in some of the framework, one in France called Impact Score, where you can report the amount of avoided emission and climate dividends that you've been issued.
Diana, can I just add on the issuance side a few words? Yeah. We might repeat it or we might forget to repeat it, but when we issue climate dividends, we ask companies, we make it mandatory for companies to publish as much data as they can on their claims so that anyone can go on our public registry, have a look at what Decathlon has been doing for the last 2 years and say, well, I have access to the public methodology. I have access to a summary of the data that were being used by Decathlon. So I can make my mind on the quality and the robustness of their claims. So everything by default at climate dividends is public and must be transparent. And that goes for everything that we produce. So every document that you see on our website or in our communications, and every data that we host is open source by default. So you can access it, you can use it even in a commercial way, you can use it as broadly as you want, because we truly believe that, of course, the process that Diane talked about is very important and adds credibility in your claims. But we also think that the methodologies that we have been working on and that we will talk about later today are valuable in themselves, and they will be more valuable if more companies are using them. So they are open source, you can use them and access them freely. There is no trap. And of course, we recommend you sharing them because it will add value, it will add robustness to the sector, and it will make sure that it becomes a standard, basically, for everyone, your stakeholders or your competitors.
Thanks. For companies, there are a lot of different ways to use and to value climate dividends. A lot of the time, companies are already calculating avoided emission, but they don't really necessarily report on it because when they are being asked about the methodology, the reference scenario, the attribution, all those questions usually are really hard to answer because there are no standard, there are no methodologies that make a consensus and can really be used at the end to compare activities of companies together. So a lot of the time it's really to value existing work. or to prove that the activity has an impact, a positive impact. A lot of climate solutions nowadays still, and it's normal, have a high carbon footprint, and there is a need that we stop only looking at the carbon footprint for them, but also at the potential, not the potential, but at the amount and the value that they bring by avoiding X amount of emission thanks to their activity. They are, of course, also looking for more support and resources, and that's why, thanks to our protocol and then all the sub-sectors methodology that we publish, we can really help on giving methodological support, and that's the point that we're going to tackle just after this. It's, of course, climate dividends can be used for communicating internally, externally, also in your HR strategy, because a lot of talents or people that are already working within your company or your fund are looking for other mechanisms to really prove the value of the company. It's also being used for making decisions for your business. And we see more and more financial use cases where we have companies that use and leverage climate dividends to get a better interest rate for their project or for their client's project. We have just published a white paper yesterday on what we call rethinking climate metrics. The idea is to show the different use cases from funds, but also from companies. And so we wrote about this. There are quite a number of pages, and you can find it on the website as well. We'll send you the link afterwards. So many different ways. We also have a lot of working groups when for specific sectors there is a need for more data, more consensus, and more actors within the same value chain to come around the same table. So we also do this work of mediation, I would say, in order to write and to give the best methodology afterwards. And we do a lot of advocacy as well in France, but also in Europe and more globally. Some of you might be here in the call, but we work with an increasing number of users, both on the investor and on the company side, and we really are happy, and we really thank all of you that started the very early days of the initiative, and now it keeps on growing. On the mobility sector, I would say you can find companies like Lisea, Z-Way, 15, and more coming, and Decathlon, of course. We have a strategy for massive adoption, and we count also on the momentum where we all need to, do something to make a change, come together. We really believe in the power of pioneers movement, of coalitions as well. We are being recognized more locally and internationally, as I was saying. We are also traveling a lot to different conferences and so on, taking a lot of trains recently. We collaborate with a lot of companies and funds, but also funds of funds now. And we just released more sectoral methodologies, as I was saying, and we're going to tackle on the mobility one. We'll send you those links afterwards, but there is one link that you can always follow where you'll find all the upcoming resources and the links to our different events and webinars. But the big highlight of this week is also this the white paper that we published yesterday, and we hope that it's going to make a big push.
Thank you, Diane. So we'll dive a bit more in the methodology and how we handle the notion of mobility when it comes to positive climate impact. Can you? Yeah. I won't go too much into details regarding our protocol. So the protocol, like we said, are our general rules. What it means to issue climate dividends. How do we do it? How does it interact with many other frameworks? It's a very interesting document. I recommend the reading of it, but it's a bit long. So I will give you a very, very brief summary. Basically, our protocol helps us talk about first the eligibility criteria. Not all companies and not all solutions are eligible under the climate dividends protocol. And this is very well detailed in the document so that you can know at a glance if you are or you are not able to issue climate dividends, basically. Then the general principle of the claim computation. How do we make the calculations? What's the process, basically, to issue climate dividends? Then we, of course, talk about the validation and verification. Like I said, we sometimes call it VV. It's the intervention of a third party, independent third party, doing an audit of your claims or the company's claims. Of course, it's independent from the association and it's independent from the company. Then how do we issue climate dividends? How do we distribute them to investors? What are the rules for the distributions? And what are the communication guidelines? If you have any questions, of course, you can have a look at the protocol. We also have sort of Wikipedia that's public, and that might be easier to navigate if you have any precise questions on what we do. It's obviously available on our website. But today, the objective is to talk about mobility. So you might know it, but we are applying the guidelines laid out in the Net Zero Initiative Pillar B guide, so the decarbonizing actions. In these also lengthy documents, you can find a lot of methodologies. Most of them are recognized as is in the climate dividends initiative, just because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, pun intended, given we are talking about bikes. So if you can switch, yeah. So we had 3 solution focuses because, of course, when we talk about mobility, the solution we are talking about has a lot of impact. The first one, and the one we'll talk more today, is bikes and what we call sometimes active mobilities. Basically, it's all forms of active mobilities, and all types of stakeholders in the value chain can be integrated in the calculations, but it's mostly, and we can say a few words about that later if you are interested, but it's mostly for the people in charge of the manufacturing, the sales, the distributions, or the rentals of this solution. It can either be selling a bike like Decathlon is doing, or it can also be offering a service like free floating bikes, city shared bikes, whatever, as long as it's about active mobility. The positive climate impact that we've modeled and that is being tracked is double. The first one and the most obvious one is the modal shift, going from one more carbon intensive means of transportation, your car, the bus, whatever, to something that is less carbon intensive, so the bike, hopefully. And we've added the notion of the renunciation to the purchase of a new car, because in some cases it's rare, but from between 2 and 10% of the people buying a bike today in France, for example, are going to renounce purchasing a new car, so that's going to avoid additional emissions. And the basis for this methodology is to base claims on user-centric surveys that are going to be able to capture the baseline, how people were moving before the purchase of a bike or the use of a service, and then you add on top of that an LCA, so life cycle analysis of your solutions, or your solution if you have only one, and basically how much CO2 did you have to emit in order to offer a bike floating service or a new bike in a shop, basically. Second focus, quite different, but always in terms of always referring to mobilities, EVs and EV chargers, which is an addition to the Net Zero Initiative, because the Net Zero Initiative didn't have a very clear stance on EV chargers. So basically, all stakeholders of what I call the electromobility value chain can make a claim based on that, whether they are producing EVs, renting EVs, or installing, manufacturing, operating EV chargers. Everything is eligible. The positive climate impact, of course, we are talking about mobility, so it's about the modal shift from more carbon-intensive means of transportation. In most cases, you want to compare to an ICE, so internal combustion engine vehicle, a classic, a traditional car, basically. I say EVs or cars. The cookbook that we've published can either be used for cars or for collective mobilities, although it's not the best fit for collective mobilities, but for individual mobilities, it works great. And the methodological basis is a market-wide study for the baseline determinations in order to capture and to precisely describe what types of cars are sold on the market today. And then you compare that to an LCA solution. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that the LCA must be very, very large because, of course, when we are talking about electromobility, you need to manufacture the car, you need to manufacture the battery. A lot of efforts and a lot of CO2 can come from the battery manufacturing, and a lot of critics, of course, from well, anyone basically can come on how well was the battery taken into account. And then also, of course, the EV chargers, how much CO2 you are going to emit to inject electricity into that, how much CO2 you need to connect that to the grid. So it's very complete. And last focus that we had was the rail, mostly long distance rail solutions, but it can also easily be adapted to subways, to tramways, whatever. And it's mostly about constructing and or operating this train line. Once again, the positive climate impact comes from the modal shift from more carbon intensive means of transportation. People before the line were using a mix of cars, of planes, of buses, or nothing, because maybe you've added demand. And the methodological basis is a traffic study, what we call traffic study, at the scale of a line, in order to determine how this line affected the population areas that are drawn by a train line. Because of course, if you have a train line from London to Paris, you're not just going to affect London and Paris. It's going to be much broader around Paris and around London. All these methodologies are or will shortly be available on our website, so that you can have a look at what they are, how they work, and how you can possibly adapt those to your own needs. I don't want to be too geeky about climate, so just keep in mind that there is a topic of functional units. When we talk about avoided emissions, we are not just comparing two products between themselves, we are comparing functions. So it's about, that's why I said it's mobility. Yes, thank you, Dan. It's about mobility. Yeah, it's about the function that you are answering. A bike is not only about being less carbon intensive or more carbon intensive than another bike. It's about comparing to the average solution on the market for this function. For example, a bike, I don't know if the figures are exactly right, but let's say from a life cycle analysis perspective, the bike emits 30 grams of CO2 per kilometer. If you are comparing it to another bike, well, it's a break even. But if you are comparing it to a car, it's very efficient. If you are comparing it to just walking, it's less efficient. And the baseline that is being used by everyone, Decathlon including, is a combination of all functionally equivalent alternatives on the market. For example, I trust the plane, because when a distance that you are traveling on a bike usually can't be done in a plane, and vice versa. Although there are a few people that are a bit crazy and that are going to fully displace a plane, but the core of the methodology and the approach and the claims is based on short distance, daily commuting or transportation, basically. And a quick overview of the technical choices that we've made. The first one is we exclude the loads and benefits beyond the system, which is something that's commonly done in the market. Loads and benefits, basically, you will have access to the slide, so I think it's quite self-explaining, but it's mostly about making sure that the steel from the car, for example, is going to be recycled at the end, but it's not accounted for in the car. It's accounted for the player that's effectively recycling at the end of the cycle. So it's mostly about attributing the positive impact to the right persons. Second choice, which is I think the most important when it comes to mobility, you might be familiar with the notion of rebound effects. The rebound effects is something that's rather hard to assess when it comes to active mobilities. It's basically about the commutes that would not have been made in the baseline. So for example, a train line was constructed between Paris and Bordeaux. People might not have made the travel if it weren't for this new line, basically. And in most cases, it's possible to take that into account, but it can be complicated when we talk about bikes, for example. If you are in a city that's very supportive, that has politics supporting the development of bike mobilities, distances that you are going to cover by bike can be shorter than their equivalent by cars, because the city closed a few roads, made sure that you use the shorter distance by bikes. And the contrary can be seen in cities that make no efforts, basically, because cyclists might choose a longer, more safer alternative to the direct road. So 1 kilometer made on this road would only avoid 0.8, for example, kilometers by car. This is something that's very complex to take into account, but that can be taken into account in the methodology that we introduced. For bikes, it might not be the most relevant, but for EVs, for example, it's very, very relevant. It needs to be taken into account. And I don't know, Jan, if you can. Yes, and the last point, of course, we need local data, because model mix greatly varies from one coherent urban unit to another. For example, 15, it's a company that's behind the city bikes in Paris, in Marseille, I think they operate in many, many cities. The baseline is going to vary a lot because people are not moving around the same way from one city to the other. For example, I used a chart from the model split in Germany, and we can see that depending on the type of cities that we are in, the people are not going to move the same way. For example, in small-sized city rural areas, people are not going to use public transport, and they are mostly going to rely on their cars, which won't be the same in metropolis. So these need to be taken into account, because, of course, it's going to heavily influence your solution if it's a local solution. So it's very true for everything that's linked to a precise city. It's a bit less important for Decathlon, because Decathlon is selling bikes to everyone, basically. So they are less tied to these elements, but they need to be taken into account when it's relevant. And the surveys, of course, are complicated, because when we talk about administering large-scale surveys on model shift, well, ideally, we would like to rely on external, independently managed surveys to customers, to end users, to really capture without any bias what they do, what they were doing before. But these are rare, and we need to adapt them. So most of the time, you as contributing entities would need to distribute those surveys basically to your customers or your end users, and we of course help on that, mostly relying on what Decathlon and 15 have been doing, because once again it was well made, so it's about building upon that. But it's a really key element of the methodology. And the dynamic aspects, people are moving around differently today than they were doing 10 years ago. The electricity is different, the energy that we put into our cars are different. So this needs to be taken into account, because in 10 years, selling a bike won't have the same effect as it has today and that it had 10 years ago. So we need to be very careful about how we update our baselines and our solutions to make sure that we are always closest to what's really happening on the market. In the attribution key, this is a core element of climate dividends. The notion of attribution key is to allow people to claim only the share of the positive impact that they should. So it's not about claiming 100% of the positive impact of a bike. It's about sharing it between the manufacturer, the distributors, the people in charge of the maintenance. Sometimes it's Decathlon all along the value chain, but it's not always the case. And for EVs, it's the same. When we have EVs, we need a battery, we need a car manufacturer, we need EV chargers, we need a grid connection, we need many, many players, and attribution keys are a way to do that. It's a way to recognize the contribution of everyone in the value chains. I think we don't need to have a look at that. Yes, I think what's important is this value chain, this way to share positive climate outcomes are mostly based on a cost-based approach. So I don't know, an EV charger represents over the total cost of ownership of an EV in Western Europe today, it represents 18 to 22% of the cost of the solution. So the fraction of the positive impact that can be claimed by the EV charger is 18 to 22% of the total impact, basically. And that can be, that's true for the rail sector, that's true for the active mobilities, that's true for basically everyone. That's very complex, of course. So we try to give as much guidance and as much public data as we can so that we can, help companies find what is their attribution key and what should they claim and what can they share in terms of impact.
Thank you, Simon. That was really, really interesting. If you have any question, you can also put them in the chat, of course. Romain, if you want to take the stage now and maybe share with all of us a little bit the journey of Decathlon and since when you joined, how do you use climate dividends, how complicated it might be, what are your challenges, and if there are a few questions for you as well.
Yes, okay. So I will, you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. So today I'm here, yes, to share with you a little feedback concerning climate dividends and Decathlon. And so I will try to tell you a little story. So where does it come from? All the story starts in Decathlon in 2021 when we developed a climate strategy and a decarbonization pathway that is compatible with Paris Climate Agreements. So we had some milestone to reach, minus 42% in 2030 and try to reach the neutrality in 2050. So to do that, we quickly start to work to reduce the impact of every single product. So it was also true for bicycles. And quickly, we began to think about the impact of the sport activities itself. So the negative impact, for example, for skiing, but also the positive impact such as urban mobility. So at this time in 2021, or maybe 2022, we really wanted to find a way to communicate positively about this practice. And at the same time, Simon shared already this information with you. Carbon 4 published the Pillar B guidelines, so how to calculate and value avoided emission. So for us at this time, all the planets were aligned to work on CO2 avoidance. So there was a match between our needs, our wishes, the context, and a methodology available for mobility product. So all start in between 2022 and 2023. So based on NZI report and methodology, we have collected our own data with the CCU. So CCU in Decathlon is a customer user knowledge service. So we don't use ADEME figures, but we work to respect the climate dividend protocol. And so with this approach, we were more confident on the results, mainly because the results are more linked with our activities, the activities of Decathlon, our products, and our users. And so how we do that? We do through a survey. So we launched in 2023 a survey. We were able to reach more than 6,000 answers in 4 different countries, and we asked questions on 5 different categories of bikes. So there was the cargo bikes, the traditional bikes, folding bikes, whatever. But it was bikes links with bikes and scooters links with urban mobility. What we ask of question, we ask about the number of kilometers done per functional journey. We also ask which kind of modal switch every user do after buying an urban mobility product. And we also ask if whether buying a bicycle prevented people from buying a car. So exactly the same methodology as Simon showed you before. Look, for example, the result for the cargo bikes, we were able to calculate in average 4,000 kilometers done per year. we were also able, in average, to have which kind of model switch done with this kind of bike. So in this case, for example, it's almost 60% of the switch from car to the bikes. And we also have the average of percentage of new car avoided. So thanks to this figure, we were able to calculate for this kind of bike around 7,000 of CO2 saved during all the lifetime of the product. And so we have the baseline scenario, 7 tons of CO2. We have the CO2 linked with the lifetime of the product, so the production, but also the recharge of the battery, maybe the change of the battery. It's 1.6 tons. And we have also, we are applying also a discount rate. And so all that we are able to calculate the avoidance factor for the cargo bike. And so today is 4.3 for the cargo bikes. And we do it for all other categories of urban product mobility. Now that we have all the figures, in 2024, we work to automate the figures in a dashboard. So now in Decathlon, we are able to link all the sales with the avoidance factor to calculate avoided CO2 emission. So here you have the screenshot of the dashboard. So now it's very useful because we have reliable real-time calculation of our avoidance emission in a dashboard. So thanks to that, we are able in 2024, for example, to claim more than 800,000 tons of CO2 avoided. For me, this is very useful, and the objectives to work on that. The first one, we wanted to communicate positively, so we had to work to have reliable figures. It was the first point. The second one is to lead the way for this metric to be more robust and useful for others. It is why today I'm doing this testimony. Also, and for me, the key point is to raise the awareness among employees who use them. So for me, it's very, very important because today I have many teammates who are very proud when we are sharing this kind of figures. And also, it helps to build operational KPI to give the business strategy and promote decarbonization activities. And now, what are the next steps? But today, we still working every day to associate all the new bikes with emission factors, because we had a survey a couple of years ago. We will have to launch a new survey to stay up to date. So the second point is to update the survey and probably how we can add other mobility accessories or kids bike, and to see if there's avoidance factor for this kind of product. We want also launch a survey link with the second life, because today Decathlon launch a second life business model in the stores and also the rental. So we have to see how we can apply also avoided CO2 for this kind of new business model. And here, that's it for me and for the feedback. So if you have any question.
Thank you, Romain.
Thank you, Romain. I might have one question. What advice would you give to other companies in the mobility sector so they can start joining the initiative?
It's a good question. Just it's
Just
not
do
so
it.
complicated. Yes, just do it. But really, the key is to see how teammates can be proud of this kind of things, because when we Decathlon, we are just selling products. So it's like we are just emitting CO2, but it's not the fact in some for some products, for example, for mobility as scooters, as bikes, we can be very proud because when we analyze all the figures, yes, for sure, we are helping to avoid the CO2 emission. So it can be proud for every teammate. So don't hesitate to go and to see how teammates can be proud of that.
Thanks a lot. Maybe just one more question from me. It's a question that we are being asked all the time. How do you leverage climate dividends towards your shareholders or maybe partners or federation, association you're in?
Alors, it's a little bit complicated because, as you said, it's not an economical figure, so it's a little bit tricky. So, 2 years ago, it was very like a key figure in the extra financial report. This year, it was a little bit complicated, but as we exchange, as the direction changed, the climate dividend really became very important, and I hope it will continue next year and the other years. And it is why this year we will have some money to launch a new survey and to be able to extend climate dividend.
Awesome. Thank you very much. There are no further questions, I think. So I guess we're all good. I have just one more information to share to conclude this this webinar. So basically, what are the next steps in general? You can definitely join the initiative. We are launching what we call a pioneers movement before the end of the year. We're going to be present at a lot of different events. And on the mobility side, we're going to be present at Tomorrow Mobility and Smart City event in Barcelona in November. So we really want to make a push in this specific sector. We talked about bicycle, we talked about EV cars, we talked about rail, but we can also talk about last mile delivery or any other types of mobility activities. So feel free to definitely reach out. If your company, if it's too early, or if it's a company that is too big, or if you're a fund and you're just starting to look at avoided emission, you can, of course, become a member, start contributing, and share what we are doing, and share the different cookbooks and this white paper on rethinking climate metrics, which we really think is adding a lot of value towards the initiative. So really welcome everyone, and let's make this a bigger movement, and let's make avoided emission more